Bryony, thank you. So if you look back on 2021, when it comes to, say, the financing of housing and tackling homelessness, what's been going on? What have been the key things in 2021 that stick in your mind?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that we all know it's been a Welsh election year. So with the start of a new Senedd term, it was reassuring to see the commitment in the programme for government to reform homelessness services and focus on that prevention and rapid rehousing. So this demonstrated a very clear priority for tackling homelessness for ministers and has sort of set the scene now for the next 5 years. More recently, actually very, very recently, the Welsh Government and Plaid Cymru's cooperation agreement has contained that commitment to end homelessness and to take action together by implementing the Homelessness Action Group recommendations, which again includes targeted prevention as well as increasing the supply of affordable housing. So we're seeing this as a clear priority, not just for the government, but now this has been strengthened by Plaid Cymru's future involvement as a part of this agreement. So this leads us nicely onto our activities at CHC, where this autumn has marked the continuation of our joint Housing Matters campaign alongside Housing Cymru. This is an annual campaign aimed at securing investment in the housing support grant in the Welsh Government's budget. So the housing support grant is the pot of revenue funding from the Welsh Government, and this funds tenancy support and prevents homelessness. So the campaign usually starts in autumn ahead of the publication of the draft budget in December, and that will continue through until the budget is finalised and agreed.
Fantastic. So it's obviously been very, very busy. I think everyone would agree that it's been another exceptional year in the pandemic. I suppose we're 2021, we're used to pandemic conditions now, aren't we? But how much do you think that pandemic has sort of brought into sharp focus the need for funding for housing? Because housing is so important. We've probably spent more time inside our own homes in 2021 and obviously the year before as well than perhaps ever before.
As you say, it really did bring the issue into sharp focus, and particularly the efforts and the gains that were made by local authorities, by third sector partners and the government, obviously, into getting people into their homes and keeping people in their homes as well. So everyone is very much focused, shares the same message of wanting this to continue. And that's why the housing support grant is so important, because it allows specific schemes to continue. So the type of support that someone accessing these services might receive would include managing money and debts, making sure that they're getting the benefits they're entitled to and maximising their income, as well as managing health and well-being. And we know that's very important when it comes to homelessness, given that a third of it is caused by a health problem. So there are many housing support schemes operating across Wales, which is why a sufficiently funded housing support grant is so important, so that they can continue to exist and further prevent homelessness.
Absolutely, it is vital that it's there. I mean, your role is, you spend a lot of your time in meetings, speaking to policymakers, trying to thrash out the detail of what policy means for the sector. Can you give us an insight into the sorts of conversations you have and the work that you've had to do in order to drive these sort of sustained levels of progress when it comes to securing certain levels of funding, for example, and tackling those big problems like housing?
Yeah, I mean, just again, coming back round to the point of how important this is to everyone, the Minister, Julie James, it's very high on her agenda, homelessness prevention. There is that shared ambition, and that's why it's really encouraging that the announcement of the recent cooperation agreement between the Welsh Government and Plaid Cymru is putting that even more so at the forefront of preventing it. And, we're getting cross-party involvement. It's making the jobs of our partners, our members, a lot easier in terms of what we are asking for. So yeah, it's a lot more encouraging place to be. But as I say, there there are asks still, and that's sort of going into our Housing Matters campaign for this autumn and December.
And do you find that because of the pandemic and because of conversations that have had around homelessness, do you find that when you're in conversations trying to secure certain levels of funding, get understanding between partners about the importance of housing, do you find those conversations are getting easier? Do you think people in other sectors, in other sort of parts of the system understand housing better?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot easier given that we've got those people on board. However, what isn't so easy is the trends, the scene still of homelessness, and actually is what we're doing and the wider, operating environment doing enough? The problem still persists. I think that's where the difficulties lie. So yeah, to be continued.
Do you think those difficulties are in sort of, making sure that communication channels are open? Because I imagine everybody quite understandably is, focusing on what they're doing as an organisation, and sometimes it's quite difficult, isn't it, to look over the fence at what other people are doing and make sure people are joined up. But do you feel that we are getting more joined up in trying to tackle these issues?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, two perspectives of this. I think from a government operating perspective, there's clear commitments in there for a more joined up approach of partnership working. And we're seeing that with things like homelessness and health, as opposed to before those things would sit in silos. And then I guess within our own work at CHC, the continuation of things like this Housing Matters campaign, this has been ongoing for quite a few years now, and so that has allowed us to really grow and build our relationship with Housing Cymru. We know how each other works now. We kind of know what we're asking for, and this has allowed us to build a stronger campaign and go for those bigger asks each time.
So obviously making progress, which is fantastic. When you look ahead to 2022, what are the key things you're looking out for in your area of work?
So it's very unlikely that we wouldn't see a continuation of the housing support grant in the draft budget in December. So that's positive. However, what those funding commitments look like remains to be seen. So as the Welsh Government prepares their draft budget and the committees begin their scrutiny, we're going to be asking members of the Senedd to support 3 priorities, which is part of our Housing Matters campaign. So the first one is providing a 3-year indicative funding settlement for the housing support grant, which increases by at least inflation each year. Number 2, we are asking for funding to enable local authorities to continue to provide the emergency accommodation and to support people experiencing homelessness. And then our third and final priority is a bit of a biggie. We're going for a bigger amount this year, but to provide at least £300 million for the social housing grant. And again, this is alongside indicative increases. So this third ask actually will facilitate our shared ambition with the Welsh Government to deliver those 20,000 new affordable social homes for rent this Senedd term. And increasing the supply of affordable housing helps tackle those inequalities by providing sustainable housing options, and hence hoping to helpfully reduce homelessness as well. So just ahead of that draft budget, we'll be sharing stories from our members on the impact that the housing support grant has made to the individuals that they support so far. We'll also continue to work with Housing Cymru to provide a campaign toolkit for the supported housing sector, and really that's for them to emphasise the importance of the grant to MSs and to really demonstrate how it makes a difference in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. So all eyes then for you on the funding and what comes out of the budget when it's finalised next year. Bryony, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, James.